lunch with today and the lead up to the January 6th?
I don't have a list to share at this time. For folks who are not tracking, this afternoon the president met or had lunch with a group of scholars and historians to discuss ongoing threats to our democracy, whether here and also abroad. This is something that he tends to do, especially as we head towards an important day like January 6th. So it's something that it is commonly done. He's done it. He's met with a diverse group of historians before. I don't have a list to provide to you at this time.
Thanks, Corinne. On the scholars and historians meeting, that statement referenced threats to democratic institutions in the country. Does the president think that there are any specific policy changes that are needed to strengthen institutions ahead of the elections?
I don't have any policies to announce or preview for you at this time. Look, the president has always been clear. I've been clear from this podium as well. What happened on January 6th was unprecedented, an attack on our core principles, an attack on our democracy. What we saw was an attack on our rule of law, attack on our Constitution. We saw the Confederate flag in the middle of the Capitol building. It was a terrifying and horrific day, and a dark day in our history, sadly. But I just don't have, as far as policy-wise and our strengthening our institutions, don't have anything to share at this time.
But specifically, does he think the United States is ready to have free and fair elections in November?
Well, we have to. I mean, that is what we need. We have to. That's what the president believes in, right? He believes in having a democracy that works, on having a free and fair election. That's something that he has spoken to, obviously. But I don't, as far as our policies for our institutions, announcing any new policy, I don't have anything to announce at this time. But clearly, that is something that the different agencies who are involved are certainly making sure that we get to a place that where Americans are able to vote freely in November.
And do you have any reaction to the new data out of Treasury that the national debt has hit a record $34 trillion?
So yeah, if you look at that data, it's a trickle. There's a trickle down debt. If you think about it, Republican tax cuts are responsible about 90% of it, of the increase in the debt as a share of the economy over the last 2 decades, excluding emergency spending. And so, as we know, you've heard me say this, you've heard the president speak to this, of what he has done to certainly lower the debt. He signed a legislation to lower the deficit by $1 trillion. Right? When you think about the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to lower prescription drug costs and cracking down on the wealth tax cheats that we've seen. And then his agenda would cut the deficit another $2.5 trillion by making the wealthy pay their fair share. So that is what the president has done. What we've seen on the other side is the complete opposite. What they've tried to do is continue to give a tax break to the millionaires and the billionaires, and that what they have actually put forward would add more than $3 trillion to the debt. So that's what that data shows us, and that's what we have done to try to make sure the president has been very, very deliberate about this, to make sure that we do everything we can to certainly deal with the debt. Get him, Joe.
Thanks, Green. Has the president been briefed on the imam who was shot and wounded outside of a New Jersey mosque this morning? Obviously, there's serious concern about this having been an act that was driven by Islamophobia. Just wondered what the White House.
So we certainly were aware of the shooting of the imam outside of the New Jersey mosque, as you just laid out, and certainly we're praying for his speedy recovery. Local law enforcement are all hands on deck, obviously, and is investigating, and certainly we hope that they're able to complete their work soon. I don't have anything else. I would refer you to the FBI on any specifics, and I have not spoken to the president, but obviously we are aware of it.
And just given that this is the first briefing of the new calendar year, is there a way in which you could sum up sort of what the president's top priorities are as we head into a new year, particularly given that this is the last year of his first term?
So look, the way that we see the president's, even the president's first 3 years, he's done more in the first 3 years than presidents have done in the first 2 terms, or their first 2 terms, in their 2 terms of their presidency. And that is, if you think about historic pieces of legislation, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's Ships and Science Act, whether it is, is it the Inflation Reduction Act, as I just mentioned, which is historic in nature, as we talk about clean energy and lowering prescription drugs, that is incredibly important. And what we need to do, and what the president wants to focus on, is implementing those, right? Continuing to implement those really key, important legislation that's what you're going to see the president do. Last year in his State of the Union, you heard the president speak to finishing the job, and so that is something that he wants to continue to do, right? Whether it's making sure we have veterans, making sure that unity agenda that he talked about, making sure that we're focusing on our veterans, focusing on getting fentanyl off the street, focusing on how do we deal with cancer. Those are the things that the president's going to continue to talk about. And one of the very important things in the Inflation Reduction Act is that insulin cap at $35 for adults. He wants to make sure that happens for all Americans. So there's a lot to work on. We saw the data coming out of 2023 on the economy and where the economy is headed and how Bidenomics we believe is working because of that data. And so there's still a lot of work to do, and that's what you're going to see from this president.
The emphasis heavily on implementation as opposed to there being other pieces of legislation that the White House is hopeful.
I mean, look, I think when he talks about the unity agenda, there's more things to be done, right? There's more work to be done that continues on the historic, I think the historic first term that the president has had. So certainly there are more things to be done, but implementing those historic pieces of legislation is important as well.
Secretary Mayorkas has obviously been up on the Hill negotiating this deal, trying to hammer out something on the border, but at the same time the House is formally beginning impeachment proceedings against him. Do you have any concern that this will complicate a deal? It could hurt negotiations, especially as we're up against the clock here?
So I kind of addressed this at the top, how baseless it is and how they're wasting their time on impeachment proceedings that make no sense. And that's not what the American people want them to focus on. And that's certainly, we see that from House Republicans, obviously, and it's a political stunt. It's baseless. It's purely baseless. And instead of coming together to deal with potentially what's going to happen on January 19th, a shutdown, instead of dealing with that and really keeping to their word of that bipartisan agreement that the president did and made back in 2023 and keeping that deal, 2/3 of House Republicans voted for that. We saw bipartisan support in the Senate. And what they're doing is they're not doing their job. They're focusing on something that Americans do not want to see. They want us to deliver on things that matter to them.
But regardless of that, are you concerned that the fact that they are taking this action, even if you disagree with it, that it's going to make this more difficult, that it's going to complicate all of this?
We think it's baseless, and we think it's a waste of time, and we think it's not the focus that they should have. That's not the focus that Americans want them to have. And so, look, we were able to come together when you think about the budget, when you think about where we're headed potentially on the 19th, to come with a bipartisan agreement to keep the government open. That was done in a bipartisan way. 2/3 of House Republicans voted for that. So we can get this done. They agreed on it. But yet they want to focus on something that is not going to keep the government open, that's for sure. Okay,
Last night, the president said that he needed more money to protect the U.S. southern border. Give me the money. Does he think it's a lack of money, a lack of funding that has led to the current situation at the border?
I mean, look, it's certainly there's a reason. Let me step back for a second. If you look at the national security supplemental that the president put forward, he put border security in there, right? Because he believes in order to get the work done at the border, we need more resources. DHS needs more resources. Our Border Patrol agents need more resources. We need more immigration judges. We need more resources to get this done. We need the technology at the border to deal with what's going on with migrants at the border. And last May, the Speaker and the Republicans in the House, they voted to get rid of 2,000 Border Patrol agents. I mean, that's their focus. So of course, that's not helpful. So we need the resources to actually do the work, and they keep getting in the way. House Republicans keep getting in the way of doing the work to deal with what we're seeing at the border. So they're obstructing. House Republicans are obstructing. That's what they're doing right now.
But does the president believe it's just a money issue, or does he think that the policies have to change?
Well, I would remind you, Weijia, on the first day of his administration, he put forth a comprehensive immigration policy legislation, and he presented that to Congress. And he did that because he understands that the immigration process or the system has been broken for decades. So obviously, we need to change policy and work on policy to deal with a broken system. So it's both. It is, and that's what you've been seeing from the Senate side. Both Republicans and Democrats have been talking and negotiating for the past couple of weeks on how to deal with the border situation, border security, and it's been a policy conversation and a funding conversation. So it's both.
And does he have any New Year's resolutions?
I don't have the president's New Year's resolution. I think what I will say is that the president wants to continue doing the job that he has said that he's going to do on behalf of the American people. That's what we've seen him do the last 3 years. I've talked about the historic piece of legislation that's actually going to deal with health care, going to deal with veterans' health, right? Going to deal with clean energy and climate change, going to deal with key issues that matter to the American people, Bidenomics, making sure that the economy works for all, we're building the middle class. Those are the things that the president's going to focus on. Go ahead, Justin.
Two quick ones. The first, after the plane crash in Japan, I'm wondering both has the administration offered any support or is it working on the investigation of the crash, and has it prompted any review, especially of certain tarmac safety procedures?
Let me just first say, Justin, our hearts go out to the families of the Japanese service members who lost their lives in this terrible accident. So we're glad that the passengers and obviously the crew members were able to get out on the commercial flight, was able to get out safely. That is incredibly important. Any specifics on any questions about investigations? That was something for the government of Japan to speak to.
The resignation yesterday of Harvard's president seemed to generate a lot of conversation. I know the president, or you, weighed in after her testimony on Capitol Hill, but I'm wondering if you have a reaction.
So, look, I know there's been a lot of coverage of this, and so I want to be very mindful and careful, and I've said this before, when it comes to either private institutions or colleges and universities, we're not going to comment. We're not going to comment on any personal decision that's been made. And I want to, as you asked, because you asked me our comments from here and what we said from here, we believe that this is a moment for leaders to have moral clarity. That we believe that is incredibly important at this time to have moral clarity, and look, any calls for genocide are monstrous and they're antithetical. There should not be a place for that in this country, and we're always going to call out hate, and we're always going to be very, very clear about that. And I will add that you heard the university presidents who testified also apologize, right? And you heard them say this. I'll quote what President Gay said. She said, "I'm sorry, words matter." I'll quote what President McGill said. "I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate." So we believe it's a time to stand up and show leadership, and we believe that's what we did at that time.
Thanks, Corinne. On the border negotiations, can you comment on the concerns raised by some of the Hispanic caucus members and other elected Latino leaders who feel they've been kind of cut out of these talks?
So look, we've been in touch with Democrats, obviously members of the Hispanic leadership, and we've done that as these conversations have been going. We're not going to speak to certainly private conversations. But I'll say this, the president believes that we need to have a bipartisan agreement. That's where he believes, on both funding and also policy. And that's what you've seen from Democrats and Republicans on the Senate side. And that's what they've been doing. They've been having those conversations during the holiday season and throughout this week as well. And so we believe those conversations are headed in the right direction. And so, again, I said this moments ago, the president believes our immigration system is broken. That's why he put forth a legislation to deal with the comprehensive legislation to deal with the immigration system. And so now we're having a conversation, a bipartisan conversation about how to move forward. We're going to continue certainly to hear from the leaders, obviously, and to hear what they have to say. And we've been in touch with them. We've had conversations with them. Not going to go into private conversations. And, it's being hammered out. I don't want to get into specifics from here, what the policies are going to look like, what's in or what's out. We think it's heading in the right direction, and it is important to have these conversations.
The concerns that they've raised, they say the discussions is leading the Biden administration into a trap. Asylum discussions, that making it harder to migrate legally will only increase irregular migration. Have you heard that from them specifically, and how does?
So look, I've seen the reporting just like you have. Obviously, the team here has had conversations with leaders. here's the situation, right? The situation is that this system, this immigration system, has been broken for decades, and we need to have a bipartisan agreement to move forward on how to deal with the system. That's what we need to do, both on a policy front and a funding front. And so that's what you're seeing from the Senate side on both Republicans and Democrats, and it's been weeks of conversations and negotiation. And we think that is important. That's the only way we're going to be able to deal with this issue. And it's headed in the right direction. I'm not going to get into asylum. I'm not going to get into asylum policy. I'm not going to get into specifics. And so I'm just going to have to leave it there, obviously. Go ahead, Mike.
Green. The House Committee is moving ahead with impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas. There's a hearing scheduled for next week, so I'd just like to get the White House response, and also just to clarify, does the President still have confidence in the Secretary?
Absolutely, the President has confidence in the Secretary. I think, and I've said this moments ago, I said it at the top as well. We believe that what they're doing, the House Republicans are doing with this impeachment inquiry is baseless. We believe that it's a political stunt, and we believe there's no time for that right now. There are things that the American people want us to get done, and that's what they should focus on. And you know, it is unfortunate that this is where the House Republicans, that's the road that they want to go down with this impeachment proceeding. That is really unfortunate when the American people have been very clear. They want us to see it, they want us to work in a bipartisan way to get things done for them, and that's what the President wants to do. Go ahead, Karen.
To back on the border negotiations, has the President spoken to Secretary Mayorkas since he met with the bipartisan negotiators on the Hill yesterday?
I would literally would have to check. I don't have any call to read out, but obviously the President speaks to his cabinet secretaries on a regular basis. But on this particular meeting, I don't want to get ahead of that, so I would have to check in. But he speaks to them on a regular basis. Obviously, it's his cabinet.
And you've said you're not going to get into the details of what's being negotiated, but broadly, does the White House want to see Congress clear the supplemental before turning to the government funding issue before January 19th?
As you just laid out, Congress has a lot of work to do. They do. The supplemental, the reason that we put forward a supplemental, they are emergency requests that we believe are incredibly important and that needs to be dealt with on behalf of the American people. So obviously, those are important. Those are emergency requests that the President asked for. So critical, very critical to the American people. And, you know, their basic job for for Congress more broadly, is to keep the government open. That's their basic duty, is to keep the government open. And all they're doing is dealing with a bipartisan agreement that the President made with Congress, right? It's something, again, I'm going to repeat myself here, something that 2/3 of House Republicans voted for, something that we saw come out of the Senate in a bipartisan posture. And so they have a lot to deal with. They have a lot to deal with, and they should just do their job.
Does the President still have plans to visit the disaster site in East Palestine, Ohio?
So I don't have any schedule of the President at this time, but I will say this: the President continues to oversee, as you know, and we've said it multiple times from here. It was a robust recovery effort to support the people of East Palestine, and we will visit when it is most helpful. The President will visit when it's most helpful to the community, and so we're going to continue to stay on the ground as long as possible. Remember, because we had that robust operation while ensuring that Norfolk Southern is held accountable for the trauma they inflicted on this community. But in the meantime, this is another thing. I was just asked about Congress, the supplemental and the budget. This is another thing that we want Congress to act on. It is important that they do their part to enhance rail safety. That is something that Congress has to do, and they have to do it by passing a bipartisan Railway Safety Act. That is something that they need to get to. But the President's going to continue to be there for the community, as he has been for the past several months.
And, Argentina has reported 3 foreign nationals, Syrian and Lebanese, arrested on suspicion of plotting a terror attack. Is that something the US is monitoring? Does it raise concern levels here?
I don't have anything for you at this time. Go ahead.
Federal debt, I want to ask you about. So I heard you blame the Republicans for the federal debt, but President Biden has been in office for 35 months, and over the past 3 months, the U.S. has added $10 billion per day to the federal debt. So, and that's not turning around. So is there a discussion here about cutting spending then?
Republican tax cuts are responsible for 90%. 90% of the increase in the debt. 90%. That is something that Republicans are responsible for. What the president has done, and you've heard us talk about it, I just talked about this, he's put forth legislation like lowering the deficit by $1 trillion. And that's part of the lowering prescription drug costs and cracking down on the wealthy tax cheats. That's what he's done. You know, $1.5 trillion, again, another way to lower the deficit, and that is through wasteful spending on special interests like Big Pharma. The president beat Big Pharma. That's what he was able to do last year because of the policies that he has put forth. And meanwhile, yeah, you know what? The GOP, or congressional Republicans, what they want to do is they want to continue with their Maganomics. What they've proposed will add $3 trillion to the debt. That's the numbers. You're a data guy. That's the numbers. That's what we have seen.
Real quick, also on the border, the vice president is in Los Angeles. Went to Los Angeles to Las Vegas today, and the House Speaker is along the border. Does the president still have confidence that the vice president can get to the root causes of the migration to stop the flow?
The president sees the vice president as a partner. She's a partner with him on all of the successes that we have seen, what we've been able to do the first term in this administration, the first 3 years of this administration. I just listed out historic pieces of legislation that we've been able to get done, whether it's lowering prescription drugs, whether it's dealing with veterans care, whether it's dealing with climate change, whether it's Bidenomics dealing with the economy. That is something that he has done in partnership with the vice president. So he has all confidence in her and will continue to do so. He has confidence in the vice president. I answered your question. Go ahead.
With the additional indictment of Senator Menendez, does the president think the senator should resign?
That's up to him. That's a decision that he needs to make. And obviously it's a serious matter. And he thinks it was the right thing that he stepped down as chairmanship. As anything else to your question, that's something for the senator to decide on.
Broadly, though, does the president trust the senator? And has the senator been cut off by the White House, communications
I'm not going to get into any private discussions here at the White House, but that is something, as it relates to him resigning, that is something that the senator has to deal with. Go ahead.
You mentioned the immigration proposal that the president put forward a few times. Are there any pieces of it that the president is now pushing for in these border talks?
I'm not going to get into negotiations from here.
Why is he not actively pushing for any parts of it?
I didn't say he wasn't. I'm just saying I'm not negotiating from here. Okay.
Thank you, Corinne. A couple weeks ago, you had said what we're seeing at the border isn't unusual, but in the month of December, there were more than 302,000 migrant encounters, the highest total for a single month ever reported. So does the administration concede that what we're seeing now is unusual?
What I said was, to be exact, is that what we're seeing at the U.S. is ebbs and flows in how many migrants arrive at the border. It's something that happens every year. It ebbs and flows. And it's fueled by efforts of smugglers to encourage irregular migration. And I will add, since May 12th, DHS has removed folks who have been here illegally, who were not here on a legal basis, about 460,000 people that they've been able to remove. That's what I said. Every year we see an ebbs and flow, and that's what we're seeing at this time, and which is caused by misinformation and disinformation from smugglers.
Well, ICE reported that they only deported 142,000 in all of fiscal year 2023. December had more than double that cross in just a single month. So how is that really a measurable consequence?
Since May 12th, DHS has been able to remove and return over 460,000 individuals who did not have a legal basis to be here. That's what DHS has been able to do since May 12th. And I will remind you, that just last week we had Homeland Security Advisor Sherwood Randall and Secretaries Biden and Mayorkas meet with the Mexican government just last week, and it was a productive conversation. And we believe that the President of Mexico has taken significant enforcement actions, and we are starting to see the results. And so a lot of this is diplomacy, right? A lot of it is having diplomacy. A lot of it is enforcement. I just laid out how last May, while DHS was starting to remove folks who were not here on a legal basis, you had House Republicans voting to get rid of 2,000 Border Patrol agents. That's what they were doing. So we're trying to deal with the issue, and we get it. It ebbs and flows every year. We get it. We understand what's happening at the border. That's why there's negotiations happening on the Senate side with Republicans and Democrats to deal with this issue.
Dealing with the issue as the administration's also fighting to keep up, to remove razor wire along the border that is intended to keep, this surge lowered, to keep people out from crossing illegally.
Governor Abbott's razor wire does not prevent. It does not prevent non-citizens from unlawfully crossing. That's not what it does. If anything, it puts at risk, it puts the lives of the Border Patrol at risk. It puts them in danger. That's what the razor wire does. And that's what the Governor Abbott is doing. Again, a political stunt that doesn't actually fix the problem and puts Border Patrol agents.
Fixing it right now?
Well, I just don't, but I mean.
Sure, a temporary solution, obviously, but I guess the reason that I'm
But
coming to
Jackie,
it from this perspective is because
it puts Border Patrol, it puts them in a difficult position, right?
I hear you. But when you're talking about the impeachment proceeding, for instance, as baseless, and you have, Democrats calling on the administration to do more. You had the mayor of Denver today saying that Denver has become the highest city per capita for migrant recipients in the country. You've had mayors in New York and Chicago begging for more federal help, saying that the administration is not answering them. And then you have Texas saying that they've had to take measures into their own hands because the administration isn't enforcing existing laws on the books. The numbers keep going up. You have, records being shattered every month. A population bigger than the size of Seattle coming in since October. And I understand where you're coming from, but in the meantime, when there's really not been any progress, and you've always talked about how this has been an issue for decades, what is the administration doing right now to actually improve the crisis at the border?
We have House Republicans that's literally blocking the president's effort to do something. That's what they're doing. They're playing political games. They're doing political stunts. Literally, House Republicans themselves voted to decrease the amount of Border Patrol agents by 2,000. They're getting in the way and they don't want to help. But we are glad that we are working with Senate Republicans and Democrats in a bipartisan way to come up with a bipartisan agreement to deal with the border security. That's what we're seeing. Those negotiations have been going on. They're continuing this week, and we really do hope that we come to a place where we can talk about a bipartisan agreement where we can deal with the funding and the policy. And House Republicans are getting in the way. That's what they want to focus on. That's where they see there could be the most effective. And that's not what we believe. That's not what the American people want. Go ahead, Peter.
Just to be clear, how does the razor wire put Border Patrol agents at risk? Karine, the Biden administration themselves said that the agents have been cutting the wire to provide medical assistance to migrants or to apprehend migrants who have already crossed into U.S. territory.
Let me be more clear. It makes it more difficult. It actually makes it more difficult for Border Patrol to apprehend those who do cross. So I'm going to just clear that up a little bit. It just makes it, just to be more clear, it does make it more difficult for them to do their jobs, right? It does.
Quick last question, if we can. President Biden obviously campaigned on the idea of being a bipartisan leader, the ability to work together. One of his biggest successes, the White House would say, would be the infrastructure law right now, $1 trillion. It was approved with the support of Democrats and Republicans. Right now, there's a new Republican House Speaker. President Biden hasn't had a one-on-one meeting with him yet. Many weeks have now passed. Is there any indication when that would happen, and what's precluding the president from saying, Speaker Johnson, come to the White House, let's sit down and talk about this?
So here's what I'll say to that. You have Speaker Johnson, who has been very clear where he stands on the border, right? Who continues with the House Republicans to make this a political issue and to move forward with political stunts, and has blocked any efforts for the president to deal with the border. That's what we've seen. That is what we've seen from the speaker. Now, the president has been able, with his team, right, to have a bipartisan conversation and negotiation with senators, Republicans and Democrats. That is a good thing. That is a good thing. We think those negotiations are headed in the right way as we talk about border security. And, we are hopeful. We are hopeful that we'll come to a place that we are dealing with an issue that Americans really care about. And that's where we are, Peter. That is where.
The two sides to meet.
I don't have anything to read out to you, but that is the playing field that we're seeing right now. That is. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.